And Carla, I was well into my 30s before, like even at PRBI, before I was getting this sorted out. And I would say I'm still sorting out stuff. We are not going to be perfect until we reach eternity.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla, and I just had a nice sit down with Waldie Neufeld. And Waldie, in a way, almost feels a bit like a dad to me, because he was a president of the Bible college that I was at, and he taught me some courses. And I remember just seeing him a lot. And he also mentored Jason, my husband. And so just like hearing his name, it kind of kept coming up. So as I was talking to him during this interview, I just felt like, man, like he just shares so much from his heart, and like he just seems to not really care what people think. He just kind of says it like it is, which is awesome, because he says one of his biggest struggles is always like worried about what people think. He was always concerned about that. So just really neat to see where he's come and really look up to him. Plus he's written a book. So we talked a little bit about his book and talked about what is disciple making, what is spiritual mentoring, what does it look like, and why is it important? So anyways, such a great conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. All right, so Today I have here Waldie Neufeld, and Waldie and I actually met Waldie at Bible College. This was at PRBI, Peace River Bible Institute, in Sexsmith, Alberta, which is right by Grand Prairie, and that was back in 1999, and you taught my hermeneutics class, and I remember going into hermeneutics, and hermeneutics is all about, like, breaking down the Bible, like, figuring out the grammar, the sentence structure, and all that, and I must say, it wasn't the most exciting class in the world, but I did learn a ton in there, so it was so good. So, Waldie, I just want to welcome you to the Carla Rand Show. I'm super happy to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. It's a privilege, Carla, to be a part of this process. And so I just thank you for that.
Yeah, and I had your wife Sharon on a while ago, a couple of months back, I think. And
correct.
Yeah, man, it was so good to have her, and so I wanted to have you. And I also heard that you were writing a book, and so I was like, I want to hear more about the book. So we'll kind of get into the book thing. But let's first of all just let our listeners kind of understand who you are and like sort of where you came from. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, Waldie? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your family. Kind of how did you get from baby to here? Give us a bit of context.
Okay. I grew up in Manitoba, a English community called Killarney, Manitoba. I grew up on a probably would be called a bivocational home. So my dad was a pastor, but he also was a full-time farmer. So we were on the farm working at pretty young ages. I have some wild stories, but we won't get into that.
Tell us the one wild story. I want to hear it, because I will never forget that story. And I think if you tell it to their listeners, they'll never forget it either. I think it was something about being like one kid was using the pedals and one kid was steering or something.
Yes. Yeah. My brother and I probably he's 1 year older, 5, 6, so we could be 6, 7, but I was on the floor pushing the pedals when appropriate, and he was operating the steering wheel. And we were put in the truck to drive a grain truck. It wasn't a half ton. It was a grain truck home. And so I was on the floor, couldn't see anything, and he was telling me what to do.
Oh, man. That's just like, when I think of that story, I just think, oh, my goodness, like, where was your mom, But anyways, that's crazy. Like, you survived it. That's awesome. Okay.
That's right. I'm alive today. Yeah. So after growing up, then Sharon and I got married, and we actually farmed together for 7 years. And then we started down our educational trail. I went to Briarcrest Bible College, so that was part of the trail. We have 4 children. Sharon probably mentioned that. And we have 15 grandchildren, and they range in age from 21 down to 2. So lots of variety in height and lots of variety in personality.
Oh, yeah.
Briarcrest and... lots of people think because I was at PRBI so long that I went to school there, but I didn't. Went to seminary in Dallas, Dallas Theological Seminary, and then I've also done postmasterate master's work at Gonzaga University in Spokane. So I should point out I stepped away from PRBI. So that was the spring of 2019. And first helped my son out driving industrial equipment. And then I have worked on a farm in the heavy seasons, combining and driving tractor. So yeah, we've been busy.
What's it like stepping from the academic world, Waldie, where you're constantly dealing with people and you're teaching classes and you're having meetings, to all of a sudden, like, driving a tractor or combine? Like, what was that shift like for you?
Well, it was lovely because what I tell people is that nobody can knock on your door.
Yeah.
You're you're moving along too fast for it. Well, I guess, yeah, some people could run alongside, but nobody does.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a nice reprieve. Got my head back into the game. So it was necessary.
Nice. Kind of like a break, maybe a brain break a little bit, mental health kind of break.
Right. Yeah, and I was writing the book in between, so it was always nice to write for a couple of months and then go and drive tractor for a month and then write for a couple of months and get back into it. So they were nice shifts.
Did you find that, like, because you're writing the book, that when you were spending all that time in the tractor, did it almost help you write the book? Because then you were like kind of had time to process, or did it not really make that much of an impact?
No, it did, because I would rethink things, and then of course because of our phones, I would put lots of thinking into my phone, or I would phone Sharon and we would chat about it. And our world is so different today to sit in a tractor and you can put earbuds in and you can talk for an hour. And as long as my hands were free, you were fine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, picture the hands are free. Otherwise, you get the rows are a little bit off.
Well, yeah, but you've got GPS today, so there's no rows that are not like when I grew up and you were mocked for a crooked row. No,
Yeah.
GPS makes it pretty nice and straight.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Waldie, why don't you tell us a little bit about some obstacles in your life? Like, what are some things, because, you are the way you are. And there's a reason why you are that way. There's a reason why you wrote this book. There's a reason why you're passionate about discipleship. I'm guessing it has a little bit of something to do with part of your life. Do you want to just give us a little bit of idea of kind of maybe some obstacles that you've had to overcome, whether it's kind of when you were younger or maybe it's more in your later years? Just a couple of things that you don't mind sharing with us.
Well, it would, you're right, it's childhood. So yeah, just to think through some of them, but probably the biggest obstacle would be just the fact of determining out what my passions were. Farming was very easy. It wasn't easy to get into, never is, but it was easier for me to get into because things fell into my lap at the age of 18, got going very quickly. But Sharon would come and say, why are you reading all the time? And so it opened up a conversation between the two of us about what's really your passion. And so I all of a sudden found out my passion was teaching, and teaching the Bible in particular, which the church allowed me to do those years. And not so much farming. But once I figured out, well, I want to teach, of course, then I have to go to school and getting uncoupled from the farm. And I loved cattle, and cattle were my sort of why I stayed on the farm. But through a series of circumstances, then they were gone, and I was free, and we left the farm. Excuse me. The other would be a simple fact: people saw me as a farmer and never as somebody down an educational path, right? So sometimes people lock us into, this is who you are, and they never see anything bigger. So that was the next biggest challenge that I had to overcome. And because I was very quiet, that was another factor. And so getting past those things, and the Lord guided me through them. to help me in this educational path to where I ended up at PRBI. And yeah, there's stories all the way along.
Yeah, it's like, how do you get this person who's really quiet? Like, if you realize that your gift is teaching and that's your passion, but you're really kind of a shy person, you're really quiet. It's like, well, how am I going to get from here to there, right? But clearly, like,
Right.
God showed you that path and you got there, because when I was at PRBI, you were teaching hermeneutics and you didn't look quiet and shy there. So,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And people at, yeah, in the Grand Prairie area here don't view me as shy. But if I go home, then they say, wow, what happened to you?
mm,
And I don't go home a lot anymore because I only have a brother in our home area.
mhm.
So then those people don't see me as much. But there is definitely a contrast between what I was and what I am.
So, do you think that's also what made you so passionate? Like, where did you get your passion for discipleship? Because PRBI, when I was there, was all about discipleship. When you first would go there, your first year, you would be discipled by somebody, or mentored, it would be another word, that you'd be discipled by somebody. And then your second year, you were expected to now start discipling other people. So, my first year, I was discipled. My second year, I started discipling others, and you were still discipled by somebody. So, you were always being
Yes.
discipled. And as soon as you had 1 year under your belt, you were expected to start building into the life of somebody else. And that was the structure. And man, was that ever helpful, Waldie? Like, was that something that you came up with? Was that already well established in the college when you were there? And where did your passion come from for discipleship?
Well, let me answer the college question first.
Okay.
That probably was a journey of the staff in the 90s.
Okay.
So our president at the time, Reuben Quill, came up with this model, but then it was quite a few of us working together to establish how we would do this and what was effective. And I would say that it was exactly people that built into my life and Sharon's life over the years that helped form some of our thinking in this area. So I had people specifically, not so much in my 20s, but in my later 20s and my early 30s, specifically take me under their wing. I had a doctor, Leonard Allred, in North Carolina, that kept saying, you've got to go on to seminary and get your doctorate, and you've got to teach. You've got to teach. And those comments, and there was others, kept ringing in my head. And then there was others along the way that said, Waldie, you need to work on this area of your life. Like, you don't be this shy. So, then to learn how to work on that, right? How do you work on not being so shy? And when I came to PRBI, of course, I see all these students that are like that, or talk incessantly, but they're covering something up. And so how do that? Well, okay, I know what to do because somebody had built into my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember feeling a little bit intimidated by you, Waldie. What did you say to me one time? You said something like, I know what you believe based on your behavior. It was something like that. And I can't remember the context or anything, but I just remember when you said that, I was like, he's watching me. Oh my goodness. Because, I think we all have things that we're kind of trying to hide. And so we might say certain things, but it's like, no, but what is actually going on with you? And so when you said based on the way you behave, I'm like, you're right, but that kind of scares me. Like it's like you're seeing past this facade, or you're trying to
Right.
see past the facade. And so it's interesting when you made that comment about like seeing all these people that they're maybe talkative or whatever, but they may be trying to hide something. Maybe that's a bit of a gift of yours too, being able to kind of notice that, because not everybody will notice that.
I'm not sure it's so much a gifting, Carla, as it's training that took place to when people came to me and said, I want to change, I want to grow. And I knew from what Sharon and I were talking about that their behavior is giving us clues as to what they believe. Mm-hmm. So, then, okay, if behavior is giving us clues, and their speech, of course, then how I need to listen to that and determine what it is that lies behind, but I need to help them come up with it. I can't say it because as soon as I say it, they will deny it and then they won't go there. But if they come up with it, then it's far more likely that they'll deal with the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Did you learn that then? Like being like with Sharon with a lot of her like counseling and that, do you find that she was able to teach you a lot of these things then? Or where did you learn some of this stuff?
Yes. Yeah. No, Sharon and I had an interest in education. So Sharon's education was through her work where they worked with, it was a radio counseling ministry. So she learned a lot of counseling through that. And then I was in seminary. So our learning actually dovetailed. And then, of course, when we got to PRBI, we were actually working together and we could talk things through. And that really helped us sort of figure out what Bible information we needed, what are we seeing in the person, and how can we guide them forward in their relationship with God. Yeah.
So your experience just in your life with people kind of discipling you or mentoring you. And I think, is there a difference between mentoring and discipling? I think of mentoring more as like somebody that's helping you with A, B, or C. Like maybe they're helping you, with your parenting or whatever. I think of discipleship as more like they are helping you specifically get to know God more, get to like understand his word more. Would you make that distinction or how would you?
Yes. Yeah. But when we were doing this at PRBI, we finally said, okay, discipleship is understood as, the word is very elastic and people don't know really, there's no firm definition to it. So we tried to move away from using the word discipleship to using the word spiritual mentoring. People understood mentoring. Like you're right. We use that word in the secular world and we just use mentor. I'll mentor you as to how to do this job. And spiritual mentoring then was, I'll mentor you in your relationship with God and others and yourself. So guiding them in how they can grow spiritually. Because all of us are spiritual beings. Christian, non-Christian, anybody, Muslim, we're all spiritual beings. We all want a connection with God, but how we go about it is going to be vastly different. So anybody can grow spiritually, and how can I help, even if they are not specific path of following Christ, but how can I help them grow spiritually? How can I help them grow? Really, another way to look at it is with emotional intelligence. So I can help them grow intellectually, but smart people make dumb decisions, right?
Yeah.
So smart people make dumb decisions. How do we help them grow emotionally? How do we help somebody grow so they don't get bothered by what people say? So to me, that's what I needed to learn because I was far too focused on what people thought of me. No, I need to be far more concerned about what God thinks of me. Then it won't bother me what people think of me. And I won't try to pander after them.
So true. Such a good word because, so many people, I think it's natural. Humans, we're always like, well, I want everybody to like me or I want everybody to see me in this way instead of just like, be who you are, like who God created you to be. And you don't need to kind of like try to fit in a box. And I mean, I did that too, Waldie, and I've just kind of figured that out more recently that like, I was kind of trying to fit into a box. Not that anybody was trying to force me on that, but it was like, Carla's this way. This is the expectations, and so I was kind of like fitting into that. And then I just suddenly was like, I don't even like this. Like one example that I think is like, I wanted to do canning, Waldie. So like, I've got this big garden. I'm going to can all these vegetables. So I got all the stuff for canning and I was all excited. I had the right stove and I was going to can. And every single summer, like it was kind of into the fall, I would be like, oh, I need to do the canning, but I want to go outside, or I want to do this. I don't want to be stuck in the kitchen doing canning. And I found that I just kept putting it off. And pretty soon, like years and years went by and this canning stuff is sitting there. And I'm like, clearly, Carla, somebody told you about canning. You thought it was a good idea, but it's obviously not something that you enjoy. So stop beating yourself up and just like get rid of the canning stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there are expectations if you live on a acreage or a farm that you have a garden.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, my mother had two gardens that I remember, large gardens and lots of canning. But that's the way it was done. And then, of course, when we got on the farm, I mean, we had a garden, but, it wasn't something either of us were that fond of.
Mm-hmm.
So why were we doing it?
Yeah.
But we sort of let the pressure of the culture form us. And we need to, like you say, how has God created me? Not what do I feel, but how has God created me? And that's how I want to live. So God created me with a passion to teach. And people said, no, you are a farmer. You are so good at it. Well, so what?
Yeah.
I remember a non-Christian, he was a sort of a fast, like a 7-Eleven store in our community. It was just a general store. It was called Jimmy's. And I remember him saying to me, Waldie, you're a farmer. You shouldn't be going to school. Okay. So I even was getting it from the non-Christians that this isn't what Waldie does.
Yeah.
So you can allow people to form you. Mm-hmm. And so stepping away from that was difficult because I wanted their affirmation. I didn't get affirmation to leave the farm. It was only years later that people said to me, you did the right thing. But, that's years later. Some of it was a decade later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and that's the thing, like, I'm going through a lot of that now too. Like, just like, how does this look now? Like, and it seems like the more I go after kind of like connecting with people, like this podcast, like I love this, like building a business. And I'm realizing that there's things in my mind that like, I just tick in a certain way. And I feel so alive when I'm doing certain things. And so I'm like, man, like that just lights me up. Like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? Well, you had to go through a journey, Carla. You had to figure it out. And this is the time now, right? This is the time. Of course, with me, I'm quite obsessive. So I can get too obsessive and then like go too crazy on one thing. And balance is not my friend, but it's, it's useful and helpful, but it's not my favorite thing to do. But anyways, I want to talk a little bit more about your book. What exactly did you talk about in your book? So it's about discipleship, and the title of it is Teaching Stones to Love, Jesus' Method of Disciple Making. And I mean, I am not surprised that you would be writing a book about disciple making because you have a ton of experience there and you've been like, running the president of this college and teaching classes and all that about discipleship. And tell us a little bit, like, why did you write that book? What was the thought process? And maybe just a few of the points in that book that might be helpful for the listeners.
Okay, so I taught the course on disciple making, and this would be after your time. I taught it, for 15 years, and it's based on the book of Mark. So it's humorous. I mean, the students would often accuse me I only knew about one book in the Bible. It was funny because often I would preach from it. But really, the course was set for me when my mentor, I asked him a question. So, Colin, what are the main concepts, ideas that we need to address in a person's life so that they grow up spiritually, so that they grow closer to God? And he said, well, Waldie, have you read your Bible? And I thought, well, those are brilliant responses, right? When they just say, well, have you read your Bible? And he said, well, Jesus commanded it, right? And I said, yes, that's true. He said, well, if Jesus commanded it, he also modeled it. So all you have to do is pick a gospel, one of the synoptics, so Matthew, Mark, or Luke, and then you study that gospel and you'll figure out what Jesus did. So being the smart man that I am, because Mark is the shortest, I thought, no, I don't have time to read Matthew 28 chapters and study it hard, right? Or Luke 24 chapters. So Mark, if you follow Christ's model, he actually deals with specific areas in our lives, right from, let's see, chapter 1, verse 21 through to chapter 11. There's specific areas that he deals with. One is our family attachment. So we need to get our family attachment figured out. 2, we need to learn about how to live a life of faith. 3, we need to learn to deny ourselves. 4, we need to learn how to serve others. And 5, we need to learn to be servant leaders. So I go through that all in the book and give illustrations and give questions to help people sort of figure out where they are in the process and what they need to do. Because if we learn to deny ourselves, we will not be bothered by what other people say. So there's like the beauty is to me that actually it fits for everybody, Christian, non-Christian, etc. Mm-hmm. It's just, it'll of course be specifically applicable for Christians.
I have a question about that. The idea of like denying yourself, because here's what I kind of believe, okay? This is what I've always believed, is that it's like it's Jesus, others, you, right? So God goes first, then others, and then you're kind of at the back burner, and you don't really think about yourself. You don't really focus on yourself. You just kind of deal with life, like just deal with life, and don't attract attention. Don't be complaining. Just like handle it, you know? But the problem is that works really good when everything's going well. But all of a sudden, when things get really tough, and all of a sudden you haven't dealt with maybe your emotions, you haven't thought through it, then all of a sudden things can really come up. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, I haven't really thought about myself. Or maybe like a lot of moms, right? They get so into serving their family, they let their health suffer. They let their, their mental health suffer. They don't know how to meet their needs in a healthy way. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, could you speak into that a little bit? Like, where's that kind of balance, if you will, between not prioritizing yourself, like denying yourself, but also taking care of yourself? Is there a balance there?
Oh, yes. And that's what Jesus would, because he concentrates on the disciples and he deals with their family connection first. Like he's dealing with them first before it's number 4 where he finally turns to how they are treating others. So, no, I think we need to concentrate on helping ourselves grow so that we can in turn help others. You're not going to help others until you have figured out and dealt with yourself. And Jesus does that. Like it's a long way before he starts zeroing in how they're treating others. Mm-hmm. So yes, he calls us to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and mind and strength, and our neighbor as ourself. But in his model of disciple making, he zeroes in on them specifically. This is what you need to address right now. If you're going to be effective, you have to start at base 1. Mm.
So true. And I think like what happened to me, and I think I see this in a lot of leaders, we lead from the outside. It's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do all these things, but we're not focusing on developing ourselves and understanding how we tick and what's going on and what things maybe that come up that we have to deal with. And so what happens is we get spread too thin, and then I think things can kind of fall apart. Has that been maybe your experience? Have you seen that happen?
Yes, and that's when what's inside of you comes out, and that's when the ugly comes out. And yes, it's happened to me, and it is just an opportunity then for, okay, where did that come from? And what am I missing within that I need to address? So, it gives it an opportunity when you see the ugly to take a look at yourself and say, okay, the ugly is just exposing something I need to work on. It's not a shame. And I think one of the biggest things I had to learn to do was learn to accept myself the way I was, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and learn to accept even who I was as a young boy, a young man, and even a young adult. And Carla, I was well into my 30s before, like even at PRBI, before I was getting this sorted out. And I would say I'm still sorting out stuff. We are not going to be perfect until we reach eternity. So I had to learn to accept the fact that I will always be working on things. Exposure will come. And I need to grab a hold of, okay, what was just exposed? What did I just see about myself? Why did I do that? And what do I need to adjust in myself? One of the biggest lessons I had to learn is that God loves me the way I am. With my mistakes, with my foibles, he loves me. And it's safe to turn myself in. That was fascinating. Safe to turn myself in. It wasn't safe to turn myself in to my parents. There was a spanking. Now, spankings to me, they're not what damaged me. I realize some have got really bad spankings. I understand that. But the spankings weren't my issue. It was the words spoken.
Yeah. So is it just like tearing you down, words that kind of tear you down?
Words spoken in the moment that were flippant, but they sort of settle into your soul and then you run with them. Yeah, I was told that I would not make a preacher at 18. And it actually resonated with me. And I was well into my 30s before I started dealing with the lie and actually turning around and realizing that I could speak.
How do you deal with it? Because you're saying like you need to deal with things in yourself. So that you already talked about some questions that we need to ask ourselves, like where is this coming from, and we talk about dealing with it. But like, how does somebody deal with it? So somebody's listening right now and they're like, okay, I've got some. I know about the good, bad, and the ugly. I've got some ugly things going on here. How do they? What's kind of maybe the first thing to do, or maybe the first three things, or whatever? What would you say to somebody who's struggling right now, and they're like, "Yeah, this keeps coming up for me. I don't know what's going on here."
Well, for for me, I had to identify the lie. I just said I couldn't speak, and it didn't even click with me that it was wrong. And then I had to identify the lie because, Waldie, when you do speak up, you have something to say. And when you teach, you have something to say. So there's a lie lurking there. And it took me a while to figure out who actually said, who said, you'll not make a preacher, and when it occurred. So that was the lie that was in my mind. And I had to then take the truth. No, you can speak and you are well versed to speak. God is the one that has created the mouth. So I had to learn to grab a hold of the lie and discard it and grab a hold of the truth. God has made the mouth and he has given me opportunities to speak. So obviously he thinks I can speak. So I had to grab a hold of the truth and apply it to my mind and then to my heart, because often our mind tells us one thing, but our heart, our behavior, like we started out with, does something else, right? I won't speak up in class because I'm afraid. Well, why are you afraid? Well, you're afraid because of what others will think. So don't allow them to control what you do. So I had to do all that to get myself through. And there's many other things that once I understood the process, then I would grab a hold of it. But some of the biggest thing was having other people walk with me. So Colin came into our lives 25 years ago, and he was quick to catch by even the tone of my voice when I was not doing well and when I was doing well. And he would catch my thinking, and yeah. And like Zig Ziglar said, you've got stinking thinking. I just love that phrase. I mean, it wasn't my mentor that said that, but I could often relate to it, right? That's not good thinking. And then your heart gets affected, and you live out of your heart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. And I think of like all the people that you've impacted, Waldie. Like, do you have any idea how many people, like how many college students that you've like mentored or discipled over the years? Because wasn't it like a lot of times in each year you might have like five or at least three different ones that you were discipling?
Correct. Yeah, I've got a partial list that I go through in prayer once in a while for them all. Jason is on it,
Yeah.
so he is in the list. But yeah, one year one of our registrars counted how many students we had, and we're a small school. We were well over 3,000. So you think of all the names that have gone through. So yeah, and how many guys I had over the 29 years I was there. Yeah, the number goes up, and some of them I of course remember vaguely, others far more clearly. Some I've stayed in touch with, some still phone. Then others, of course, don't. And then some phone me 20 years later. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, so like a lot of people that you've impacted, and also you've done some speaking, Waldie, like at churches. I know you visited our church at least 2 or 3 times, I think, where you've just sort of come and what do you call it, like pulpit supply or whatever, where you just come to a church and you speak because maybe they don't have a pastor that week or whatever. And there's the things that you said really resonated, and there's a lot of people in our church that were just like, wow, like that message really impacted me. So it's just kind of cool, and like what you've seen at a Bible college, what you've seen in churches, could you speak a little bit to, because people are always like, oh, the church is to this or the church is to that. Like, what do you think the church is doing well, Waldie? Like right now in our culture, we'll talk about in Alberta anyways, what overall is the church doing well right now, would you say?
Well, I would say that we are doing well with providing an opportunity to worship the Lord. We're doing well in providing an opportunity to hear God's word. We're doing well in providing people an opportunity to be in relationship with each other. So I think those are good areas. But the next question I know you're going to ask is,
what do we need to
so
improve?
where are we not doing so well?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But I would say in that category, it would be the whole area of disciple making. We are doing okay. I'm not saying we are not doing it. That I'm not going to say. We are doing it, but we could do a lot better. I find that we're a little bit hesitant to go up to somebody on Sunday morning after the service and ask them how they're doing spiritually. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about COVID now. We'll talk about those kind of things, but I don't remember too many people asking me how I'm doing spiritually. Now, so that took a while for me to get into my psyche and I'm not saying I do it all the time, but sometimes people now will just automatically start talking about their faith with me because they know I do it. But I would like to see a church culture that talks about how is your relationship with the Lord. I remember having one great uncle, Uncle John, that would ask me every time he saw me, and he didn't see me lots. I'm amazed that he would remember my name, because my name is not your average Joe. And that he would then say, well, Waldie, how are you doing spiritually? How's your love for the Lord? I always remember, okay, here comes Uncle John. Am I ready for the question? And I think that's what I want to be. But I think that's where our church could grow a little bit more, in the whole area of being more personal in our relationships, and more personal in asking those spiritual questions. How are you doing in your spiritual life, in your relationship with Jesus Christ? But even non-Christians have a spiritual life. So even asking the question, how are you doing in your journey of life? Would be a great question, which I have done, and which is well received. So, can be very encouraging.
Yeah, and I sometimes will do that to people. Like I'll get them on Messenger, Waldie, and I'll be thinking like in my head, I'm like, I might want to get this person on a podcast, right? So it forces me to start asking these questions. And sometimes I even have to say, like, look, I'm not like trying to stalk you, or I'm not trying to like pressure you. I'm just asking the deep questions. Like I'm asking them about obstacles in their life. I'm asking them about their story, right? They're kind of like, whoa, who's this girl? Usually I have some sort of relationship with them already. Like I would know them, like in your case or Sharon's case or whatever. But there's some people that I might just reach out to because maybe they're a friend of a friend or whatever. But I feel like you're so right. But how do we do that, Waldie? Like, because even after church, it's like, hey, well, we only have a little bit of time. The kids are here. There's, Mrs. Jones is going to be walking by. We don't want to get into a deep discussion. So, like, is there a way that we could foster maybe more of getting more personal after church or something? Like, do you have any ideas on that, Waldie?
Well, often you can begin asking questions. How did work go? What are you being challenged with at work? And just get them to talk about that, and then move into some of their spiritual life. Because 10 to 1, what's happening at work is spiritual. So how are you handling that? And so the segue doesn't have to be difficult. It's just that I wasn't prepared to think that way. You're so used to talking about the game, or actually work, or other things, but you're not thinking, how can we get this to a spiritual plane? My goodness, we're standing in church and we've not talked about the sermon. We've not talked about anything. Like there's all sorts of points we could talk about. So I had to train myself and I still have to prompt myself to do it. But how are you doing spiritually in your walk with the Lord? But I find that people, because they know I do this, of course, are far more open and ready. So I realize now I have an advantage. But that advantage came because I practiced things along the way. It didn't come because I suddenly appeared. No, I had to learn to ask those questions.
So it's almost like if everybody that's listening to this podcast right now could like practice that in their church, practice like getting to maybe those deeper things and like maybe challenging people or encouraging them, then maybe that would kind of have a ripple effect, right? It's like you have to start with the individual instead of just like having a sermon on it. And then after the sermon, everybody feels awkward and they don't know what to do. I know sometimes sermons like they'll challenge you and then I'm like, well, I don't want to like go and do like everything that he just said because it just feels awkward, but like it gets you thinking. I had a thought one time. Well, actually, our church for a while, what we did is we would like listen to the message, and then there would be these little sheets of like just some points that the pastor would put together, and then we would like just get together in small groups, like after like during the coffee fellowship time, and we would just like kind of talk about those. And I thought, well, that's maybe like maybe more structure than we need, but at least it's a good place to start,
Right. No, and that would be a great idea to get people motivated to do it. But you don't even have to, like, I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and on others that it's got to be a full-blown conversation. But sometimes it can just simply be the question, did you see a place where God showed up at work? Like when you were in that difficult situation, was there anything positive? Like it doesn't have to be difficult. I remember talking to probably 30-some adults who came to Jesus Christ after 30. So the likelihood of coming to Christ after 30, of course, is not great. But I asked them, what started you down the path to find Jesus Christ? And they all but one said, well, I had the full gospel presentation. So the other 30 some said it was one or two comments. One person just said, well, isn't God good? She said, that's all they said. And it bothered me for weeks. How come that person said that? So I think sometimes we make it far more difficult than it needs to be. So we're standing in church. So did you see God show up in that situation this week? And they may say no, but they'll go back home and think, well, yeah, I actually did. Because I thought of situations this past week where, I thought, God actually showed up there. I didn't realize that was God. So just getting them to think that we are living in a much grander world than simply us, that God is alive and well around us, and that he is showing up even when we're little children. And he is there, but we don't have eyes to see. And so we need to train our eyes to see differently.
Yeah, so true. So I was going to ask you this question. What is it about God that keeps you coming back, Waldie? Because a lot of people, they might grow up in the church, or they might even have some training. Maybe they even used to teach Sunday school, but they just kind of don't keep going back to God. What is it about God that you're just like, no, like, I just keep going back to God?
It's God's love and my comprehension of his love, which continues to grow. My understanding of how much God loves me, the way I am, the way I was, that he loves me, he loved me before I knew him. And he loved me then, and just his understanding of how much he loves me today, even the way I am today. Now, you may think, well, Waldie, you are so far ahead, but I know what's inside. And yet I know that God loves me completely. And it is God's love for me that keeps me going back and following him. So his deep love, the understanding of God's love. There's a Hebrew word that Sharon and I both love. And it really doesn't have a good English equivalent. So you almost have to string a whole bunch of English words together to sort of say what's in it. But it's the Hebrew word hesed. So it's supposed to come from the back of your mouth, but it's the loving, faithful kindness of God, his covenant faithfulness, his loving kindness. And he is so loving that he's made a covenant about it, that this is what I'll do for you. And that's what keeps drawing me back. And I think that's what happens to us. We tend to lose sight of how much God loves us, and we begin to wander away. God never wanders away. God is always there with us. But we wander away, and I think it's because we lose sight of how much he loves us. And it's a hard concept to get into our heads, because many of us think we're unlovable. And I think, yeah, that's true. That was me. How can somebody love me? And yet God loves the unlovable, the hemorrhaging woman, the woman caught in adultery, the woman at the well, the rich young ruler. Like, he loved them all. He loved them enough to let them go their way. But he said, I'm here. Come follow me if you wish. So he loves us, and I think that's what draws me back into the relationship time and time again.
Yeah, I would say the same. And I think it's so sad that so many people, they view God in a distorted way. Like, if we really could just view God the way that he is, we would be just like climbing over people to get to him. But instead, we have this this distorted view based on maybe the way our dad was, our mom, or our whatever, because nobody on earth loves perfectly. So we have all these expectations and all these, like, if you do this, then I do that, like this, like conditional love, and it's just very hard to understand that. And I think, like you said, like it's a
Yes.
journey, and when you go through hard things, and when you go through good things, and when you go through the Word of God and you study and you learn, you start to grasp more about His love. But man, like it's the more I get to know God, the more I seriously get overwhelmed. Like sometimes I will just be like, but God, you can't love me in this. Like how can you do that? And yet he's telling me right there, he's like, Carla, I love you right here, right now, exactly as you are. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but don't I have to like climb the ladder? Don't I have to do 4 or 5 things? No, Carla, right there
No.
where you are. It's like very overwhelming sometimes to grasp that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, to think that in the middle of our sin, he loves us deeply. I remember a young man, one of the college students came to me and he said, I just see Jesus as angry. Angry. I said, oh, that's interesting. Where do you see that? And he, of course, picked some passages where Jesus was angry at the Pharisees, right? I said, well, why don't you read the Gospel of Mark? I only have one book, so
Yeah.
he read the Gospel of Mark and he said, I think he read it 6 times before he finally began to see how much Christ even loved the Pharisees. Jesus, yes, he was hard on the Pharisees, but he still kept trying to open their eyes so that they could see. But it took this young man quite a while before he began to see God's love. And like what you said, it's what's in our head about God that is keeping us from seeing what's actually in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so once we sort of get past what's in our head, we begin to see what's actually in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And there's things that I'm still seeing in Mark that I've not seen. It's, to me, yeah, I didn't see that one.
Yeah. And that's only one book. We have the whole Bible, and how much are we missing, right? That's how I feel. It's like anything. The more you get to know, the more you realize you don't know. Like that's so
Right.
true of the Bible. The more I study the Bible, because I think, well, I went to Bible college, I went to Christian school, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, yeah, but what's like, the more I get into it, the more I'm like, I'm just scratching the surface here. Like I really
That's
don't know.
right.
There's so much
Yeah.
in there. But I think until you get into the Word of God, it's very hard to understand God, because you're going to see it through the lens of the way you grew up, the expectations, whatever
Yes.
people told you, and you're not going to see the truth. You're going to believe all these lies
Right.
about God, and that is not God. So I think it's just like, if I could tell anybody about, like, a message just to allow God to speak for himself. Don't
Yeah.
take your perceptions of who he is into the picture. And really the only way to really see what God says is to study his word ultimately, because that's it's gonna come out in there. And maybe Mark is a good place to start. Maybe your book is a good place to start too. Like, I love the cover art, by the way, for your book. So it showed, and I'm gonna post it somewhere, but it showed 3 hearts, and the first one was stone. The second one was stone, but the stone was kind of breaking away. You could kind of see this red heart underneath it. And then the third is like a red heart, a bright red heart. And so like teaching stones to love, I'm assuming that means that we are the stones.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got hard hearts. So it picks the stone imagery. So Jesus said to his disciples who had believed in him, he said to them, your hearts are hard. So this is after they had believed in him, but they couldn't comprehend who he was. And it was because their hearts were hard. And so that's why Sharon and I were reading a book together this summer, and it used the title Teaching Stones to Talk. It wasn't the title of the book, it was something else. And Sharon just said, that's it, Waldie, because we had been looking for a title. She said, but it's not Teaching Stones to Talk, it's Teaching Stones to Love. And that's our issue, because we really don't even love ourselves. Those who are enamored with themselves, the narcissists, they don't love themselves either. They're enamored with a picture about themselves. So teaching stones to love God, and love others and love themselves is a journey.
Mhm.
And Jesus talked about their hard hearts. And in Mark, it occurs twice where he says, "You've got hard hearts." And, are you still so dull? You know,
I feel like, yeah, I feel like God's probably thinking about that, about me, like not in a condemning way, but just kind of like,
right.
Carla, like we've been through this, like I'll take you through it again, but like we've been through
Yeah.
this a few times now.
Well, yeah. And Jesus does that with the disciples. That's what's so ironic.
Mm.
I don't know how many times they got back into the boat, but they're in the boat multiple times. And I can just see the disciples. Here we go again. We're back in the boat.
Yeah.
And Jesus and the irony is, 4 of them were fishermen. So Jesus puts them into an area of their strength and takes them to the extreme and says, "So where are you going to turn?" So, I just think, okay, he's going to test us where we think we're strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, okay, Lord, you love me. You love me because you want me to center on you. Because then I will not be caught by what's happening around me.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are getting ensnared by what's happening in our culture today. And I think we don't need to be. No, don't get ensnared by it. Nobody is stopping us from talking about Jesus. They're trying, but we can still do this. I just think that's quite something. They control YouTube, but they can't control everything on YouTube. And so here we are.
Yeah, we have to be so discerning. Like, I think we always have to be discerning, but in this day and age, I just feel like, yeah, there's so many messages coming at you. There's so
Yeah.
much on social media, on the internet. And I just feel like, man, you have to be so discerning and you really have to be in the word. And I feel like that's what I'm missing right now, Waldie. Like, I need that mentorship again. I need that discipler again. And I've had like friends, and I've had people that definitely helped me, but just that consistency, like, hey, how's it going, Carla?
Right.
Hey, just that consistency. And I feel like, I think we all need that. We all need to look for
Yeah.
somebody that can disciple, that can spiritually mentor us, because, man, that's important. And then we need to step up and start becoming that for somebody else too, right?
Right.
You know.
Yeah. The sort of the 360 approach. I need a mentor in front of me, and I still have a mentor who's in front of me. Now he's 82, I think. But he taught in Biola. So it's Colin McDougall. But we still chat, not as often today as we used to. He lives in the States. And then 360 would say, I need somebody beside me. So I've a number of friends that are sort of within my age range that are beside me, that I banter things back and forth. And then I have plenty of others that are behind me that I bring along. I learn the most actually from those that are following me.
Yeah.
Because they don't necessarily ask me the tough questions, but by dealing with them, I am constantly asking myself the tough questions.
Right.
And I think that's good. So I have people calling, asking me the tough questions. I have those friends around me that are saying, okay, Waldie, what do we do in this situation? Or I ask them, what are you doing in this situation? So that's happening. And then the ones behind me are saying, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, let me think that one through.
Mm-hmm. So true. I think we do learn so much by teaching others. Like, it's just so important. But Waldie, where do people go to find you? So like if they want to check out your book or they just want to connect with you, where's the best place? Where would you send them?
Well, my book will come out, I'm hoping the end of November or definitely in December. And we're publishing through Amazon. First-time publishers can't get into some top-end publishing companies right off the start. So, but Amazon, of course, lets you in. And so it should be up the end of November. And my name is unique enough that they'll be able to find it that way. So, or the book, Teaching Stones to Love, both of those will come through. But the other two ways would be through Messenger or through LinkedIn.
Okay.
But I would say, I'm not quick to take on new people. So identify where you heard about me, or that would help. I mean, I have Facebook. I'm on Facebook. But I need to. I've had odd requests all the way through Facebook and my other social media sites. Especially girls wanting, and I think, no, I don't know you at all.
Right.
Some of the PRBI students I've had to actually look up to see, were you a PRBI student? Do I know you from somewhere? But Messenger and LinkedIn would be the two obvious ones.
Cool. And if you have a hard time getting hold of Waldie, just message me and I will. I'll hook you up somehow. I'll get you in.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Waldie. I really appreciated this conversation. It really got me thinking. And now I want to go and read Mark. I mean, maybe 6 times and make sure I get it. And, just studying the life of Jesus, because I think, there's so many misconceptions out there. It's just read about Jesus. Just go look at Mark, read about it. Then you can make some conclusions, but don't make conclusions based on all the things that you've been told or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I thank you for having me on, because it's really, the book is coming and I will need to do some of this. So I appreciate it very much, Carla.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Waldie. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.